Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. This morning we would like to look at the subject, the way of the fallen tree. The way of the fallen tree. And I would just like to read a portion of the book of Kohelet, that is the book of Ecclesiastes. The Hebrew is Kohelet, one who gathers a congregation. But in the Greek, the word is ecclesia, the called out ones. But as we use the Latin, we Latinize it, we get the word Ecclesiastes. So let's read just a verse of Ecclesiastes chapter 11, and we'll read verse 3. It says, "If the clouds are filled with rain, they enter themselves upon the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it is." And so our subject today is the way of the fallen tree. As you well know, that a tree in its growth, it orientates its growth to both the root and to the height. So it's what they would say is gravitropic and it's phototropic. It grows towards light even as the root grows towards strengthening the tree itself. But when the tree falls, the root is exposed and you see exactly what the tree is like. And it's only then when the tree falls you can measure the tree. And so this morning we want to measure the tree, using it as a metaphor in relation to man himself. Because the character in which a man reach its final judgment will determine his eternal destiny. As we read in Revelation chapter 22 and verse 11, he says, "At that time when Yeshua steps out of the sanctuary and it is declared, whoever is sinful, let him continue sinning. And whoever is righteous, let him continue." So that Kodak moment, when a man falls, when the tree falls, there comes a judgment, and then that will be his eternity. The passage is really telling us that if a man is only born once, he will die twice. And if he's born twice, he will perhaps only die once. Because there will be some who will not taste death when they see the Messiah come, because that's the last generation. And so we're dealing with the second birth, the new birth. If you're born twice, you'll only die once. And so a man who continues to live in his sin, unwittingly or deliberately, he is etching his name out of the book of life while he's sculpting, he's crafting his own destiny and not knowing it. Therefore, the punishment of the wicked is not an arbitrary act, but it is the consequence of the decisions that he has made or they have made over a period of time. It's their own doing. So this morning, the search for meaning continues. It has been a durable and checkered endeavor. The philosophers, the poets, and even the scientists and some theologians, they've all deposited their views on the meaning of life, which in many instances have been conjectures, guesswork. And so we are left in a quandary in which uncertainty has become a lifestyle and not just a moment. Man has tried rationalism, that reason and the ability to figure things out intellectually. That's the way to go. The Renaissance, the time of the Enlightenment, when men gloried in themselves. They've tried that. Then they said it was empiricism. It must be empirical, scientific. And so man is still on his search to find the meaning of life. And he has tried nihilism, existentialism. He has tried all that. And now we're in this era of postmodernism, where there is no truth. Truth is relative. It's not a necessity, they say. It's an option. And therefore, if there is no reality, you can create your own reality. And so we're living in the age of post-truth society. That's where we are. Because man has sought to find meaning to life. And he has hitherto not found it. And so this morning, however indubitable their conclusions might seem, and their convictions displayed in their rhetoric, in their intellect, in their minds, whatever they may say, this morning it is imperative for us to know that a life that is lived outside of Yeshua will end up just like the fallen tree and its root exposed. It will happen. We cannot speak of absolute truth without that transcendent reality. We cannot. And so no analysis of truth can be complete without the factor of the Creator. It can't happen. And so this morning we want to look at the wisest man who has ever lived. That is King Solomon. We want to look at him and see if we can glean, if we can learn anything from him that we might apply to our own lives. And so let's go to chapter 1 first and foremost. Chapter 1. The words of Kohelet, son of David, sovereign of Jerusalem, futility, futility, says Kohelet. Futility, futility, all is futile. All is futile. A generation passes, and a generation comes, but the earth stands forever. The sun also rises and the sun sets and hurries back to the place where it arose, going to the south and turning round to the north, turning, and on its rounds the wind returns. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea never overflows to the place from which the rivers come, and they return again. Solomon here gives the impression that life is monotonous. It's just one cyclical event. It's just going. We do the same thing, and it's just one of replication. In here, life is vanity. That's the impression you get. But later on, he wants you to know that obedience to Yah is not really an hypothetical construct. It's a requirement, it's a required condition for the kingdom of Yah. And so love for Yah is always expressed in obedience to his laws. It must be. And so he looks at life through the eyes of men, and he's saying, what do we get from our labors? We go out and we work and we save, and we put monies away, and then the tree falls. And someone who had never worked or share the same values as we do inherits that which we have worked hard for. And during that period of time, we have never really enjoyed the life that we lived. Life is meaningless. It is vanity, says the teacher, the Kohelet. But I want to ask you, if all is meaningless, how can we meaningfully respond to this? In that regard, what did Solomon really say? Did he say anything if life is meaningless? So we think of the man who has lived wantonly. He's lived in sin. He has lived in the elegance of his own esteem. Think of him. Prideful. He has for long sat in that high chair of pride, elevated by the noise of his own importance. Think of him. His table is sumptuously spread. His wealth is the talk of the town. But his sins are the scandal of heaven. Think of it. Then that man passes away. That same man who has lived wantonly. Think of him. Then somehow, unbeknown to the rest of us, they smuggle him into a church with the notion that we're going to church this man who has lived riotously. And his life has been one of prodigals. Businessman. His past. He was never satisfied with his wealth. always wanting more, but never found his purpose in life. Solomon is saying, I've been there. Women, I had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Wealth, no one in Jerusalem had money like me. I made silver like stones in Jerusalem. I surpassed them all. Education, I was above my class. I was the valedictorian, says Solomon. I've done it, but there was still this emptiness within him. He had climbed to Mount Everest and then realized there's nowhere else to go. And then he realized life is meaningless if that's all it is. To accumulate. Kingdoms rise and kingdom fall. Wealth accumulated and wealth dispersed. Isn't that all it's about? Where the tree falls, there must it lie. And when it lies, we begin to measure the trunk. We don't know how many winters have chilled its branches, how many suns in the summer have scorched its vine. We don't know until it's down, and then we begin to look at the tree. You see, our subject is the way of the fallen tree. And Solomon here is giving us an insight that we must not only grow gravitropically, but we must grow phototropically. We must grow into light. We must, while securing the strength by way of our roots. So we trace our roots back to the ancestors of the word, the Abraham. So we claim Abraham as our father. We have got to understand that. And so Solomon is letting us know that life, what may well seem meaningless, but there is a season. Come with me to chapter 3 of the same passage. Meaningless. Chapter 3 says, for every matter there is an appointed time. There's a season. Even a time for every pursuit under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. And he does this and he speaks this. And notice something as he writes. He writes from the mood of what? What mood does he write here? Not from the presumptive mood, but he writes from the imperative mood. It's a command. It requires an action. This is how you look. This is a word photograph of who you are. Will you respond to this? Will you make a change? So he writes here from the imperative mood. Something needs to be done. If your life has become meaningful and all you're doing is chasing the next income stream, then what about that stream that wash me and cleanse me from Emmanuel's veins? That cleansing stream. Solomon has been there, and he gives eyewitness advice. He's a precipient eyewitness. And he wants us to know there is a time. He is letting us know that a time will come when you will be held accountable. Because he looks at the futility of wealth. He looks at that. He looks at education. But he looks at the certainty of death, after which comes a judgment. And so the question this morning is, what are you like when no one is looking? That tree that falls into the forest. If no one was there, did it make a sound when it fell? Did it? If you could go and take something and no one sees you when you did it, would you have committed a crime? Solomon wants us to know that someone is always looking. Someone is always looking. Come with me to chapter 5 of the same book, and I'm reading here from the Septuagint version this time. And he says, keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of Yah, and let thy sacrifice be a readiness to hear rather than the oblation of fools. When you come to the assembly, be more willing to listen to the word of Yah than to open your mouth, by which way you give a sacrifice of fools. He wants us to know that. Because they are not sensible that they do amiss. Be thou rash with thy mouth, nor let thy heart be hasty to utter a word in the presence of Yah. Because Yah is in the heavens above, and thou art on the earth. Let thy words therefore be few. Because a dream cometh by much temptation, and a fool's voice with many words. If thou vowest something, make sure you pay it. When thou vowest a vow to Yah, delay not the performance of it, for in fools there is no fixed will. Pay thou therefore what thou vowest. Are you with me? Solomon says, when you vow something, make sure you pay it. When you come before Yah and say, that man, that woman is going to be your life partner forever. It's for a forever relationship. He said, you better pay that. That's a vow you made in front of me. How often you hear ministers stand on the pulpit and say, the Lord has given me that, and the Lord has told me that, when Yah had not uttered anything like that at all. He said when they do that, they come to the house and they give a sacrifice of fools. How often? You hear that on TV, on the radio, and elsewhere. And they have you in the pews thinking that they have a good relationship with Yah, and Yah is saying, I never spoke to them. Solomon says, be careful. Not only that you become complicit in their foolishness, but you become members of that foolishness. Be careful. And so, these are not truncated anecdotes that he's giving us. These are truth. that sanctifies us, says John. So he wants us to know that the paradox is this, that the man whose soul perches perilously is at risk of dying twice. Nicodemus understood this, that if you're born, and I said it before, once, you're going to die twice. But if you're born twice, the biological birth and then the spiritual birth, you may only die once. But at what point in a man's life does he harness his thoughts and rummage through his intellect and ask himself, if a man die, will he live again? Even as Job asked. Am I to assume that he's suffering from meiosis? There is an extensive restriction on his mind's eye. Or should I ask him to dilate his pupil, the pupil of his mind, so that he will see the word of Yah? And not only see, but understand it. Then I will know he's not suffering from myotritis. How will I know? How will I know that he is not intellectual myopic? How will I know that? So Solomon, he wants us to know. Come with me to chapter 11. Chapter 11. Send away your bread. In your Bible it says, cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days you shall find it. Send away the bread on the face of the water, for after many days thou shalt find it. What is the wise man really saying? Give a portion to 7, and even to 8, for thou knowest not what evil may come on the earth. When you read this, you understand he's addressing something here, perhaps financial. He's asking you to diversify your resources. Don't put your eggs in one basket. And as I think of him, I think of his navy that he used to send from place to place, and the journey would take 3 years going through. Cast your bread, invest, and after many days, you will inherit the benefits of it. Solomon did that. But as I think of Solomon, and I juxtapose him with the average man on the street, the Titanic generation that we live with, I think that many of us have been drinking Hemlock. We have been sipping Hemlock. And our thoughts are poisoned. Our ways are poisoned. Not only by the secular world, but also by religion. And so we have to be careful. We really have to be careful, because life is more meaningful. It's not just chasing after the wind, as Solomon in chapter 1 would seem to be suggesting. But in chapter 1, he's merely looking at it through the eyes of men. He says everything is under the sun, meaning those of us who live below the sun, not above. He said you got to look above the sun, because Yeshua doesn't deal in time. Time is a product of creation. But when time shall be no more, what will be your investment above the sun? What will it be? What will it be? So, he says, when the tree falls, when a man passes, when he dies. I've been to many places and I listened to some of the eulogies that have been read. And the resumes that they've written. And the things they've said about men who have lived riotously. And preachers have spoken lies in such contexts. The word says, after the death, after the tree falls, and the root is exposed, we will know whether it had lived gravitrophically or otherwise. Did it have roots? Did it strive for light? Did it? As we examine the branches and the leaves, and we look, are we just looking at foliage, or are we looking at fruits? Like the fig tree that Yeshua cursed. It had leaves on it, giving the impression that it had fruits beneath the leaf, but when he examined it, he found there were no fruits. And so people will tell you, you and I believe the same thing. We're going to the same place, they say. When evidence proves that it's a logical fallacy. If he who stood on Mount Sinai spoke the morality to the people, you know, when I think of that, I imagine myself at that moment in time. When Yah spoke, the word says that the place shook, the mountain shook, and the trees, their leaves, rustled. And the people say, tell him, Moses, not to speak to us, but speak to you and you pass it on to us. And he said, remember the seventh day to keep it Kodesh, to keep it holy. When he uttered that on Mount Sinai in the desert of Arabia, the people were afraid. Almost 3 million people, they hid themselves. Today you repeat that and they tell you something else. No one is afraid. We have lost that sense of responsibility and of gratitude to the Creator. We've lost it. We have become self-absorbed. And you hear the wealthy man walked around and he said, I am self-made. Someone once said that to Winston Churchill, that he was self-made. And in retort, Churchill said, you have just relieved God from a responsibility because you're self-made. And so Solomon, as he recounts his experience, remember, Solomon wrote Song of Songs in his youth, when he was a young man, and you read through and it's very romantic and love scenes, and that's what the giddiness of youth looks like. He wants you to know that. But then he begins to develop root. And so he wrote the book of Proverbs. And you see now reflection is rummaging through, as all of us should, and ask ourselves questions. How have I lived? Have I chiseled out a set eternity? Have I already cast the die? Where will I spend eternity? We've got to ask that. Because you've been allocated a certain amount of time, but you don't know how much. Solomon said, a time for everything. And the time is allocated to you. So when you say you don't have any time to keep the Sabbath and to do God, Yah's thing, I wonder, what is it you're saying? What is it? So Solomon now gleans his experience. And he reaches to Ecclesiastes and he's reminiscing. It's his old age, when perhaps the eyes are now having to contend with cataracts. And we need more frequent visits to the dentist, because those things that we once chewed with are not chewing as they should have. So he says this, because youth, I'm in chapter 12 of the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, because youth and thoughtlessness is vanity, therefore remember the Creator in the days of thy youth. Before the evil days come and the years draw nigh, in which thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. Once a man, twice a child. That's what he's dealing with. He wants you to know that when you were young, how you took up that young child of yours, that young son of yours, and you fed that child, and you change where we come from. They say nappy. They say diapers here. You change that diaper. And Solomon is wanting you to know the day may well come when that same son will have to do the same thing to you. Remember now the days of your youth. Come to Yah when you're young, not when you're old. Because the latter years are going to come when you're not going to have any pleasure in them, because the tree is about to be uprooted and be measured. Because where the tree falls, there will it lie. So long as the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are not involved in darkness, the clouds will return after rain. When once the guards of the house are shaken, are you with me? He's using the metaphor here. The guards of the house and the men of valor put flat. Your hands are now feeble. You can't defend your own house anymore. and the light is put out. The eyes, you're no longer seeing. You need spectacles, and some just cannot see. There is a restriction on their sight through old age. The grinder maids are idle. These are the teeth, because reduced to a few. Then shall the maids who look out of the windows are darkened. These are the eyes too. And the doors of the marketplace will be shut at the feebleness of the voice. You can't even speak loudly anymore. The voice of the grinding maid, which will be raised in the plaintive tone of the young ostrich, and all the daughters of the songs will be brought, what? Low. So he's an old man now, and he's looking back at his bank account, and he said, nobody in Jerusalem had money like me. Nobody was wise like me. No. I searched, and I couldn't find my second. Education. I was not only degreed, I was decreed. Women, I've been there. And that which he started out saying, life is meaningless, his conclusion is completely different. Though the almond tree have blossomed, he's talking about our hair now, the almond tree. And the locust hath been fattened, and the caper bush is shed, because the man is gone, what? To his long distant home. Did you hear that? It is appointed that a man shall die once. You didn't get me. I said, it says it is appointed that a man should die once. It was not appointed that a man should die twice. The man who dies in Yeshua, he only dies once, because he will be raised again. The man who dies without Yeshua, he dies twice. Gone to his eternal home. Until the silver cord is wound up no more, and the golden bowl be broken, and the bucket broken at the well, and the wheel of the well shall run dry with it, and dust return to dust. Did you hear that? As we go back to the book of Genesis, we see that Yah said he made man out of dust. Whatever you hear men say on TV and elsewhere, on pulpits and in pews, the word said they're dust. How did you make him, Yah? Oh, I made him out of dust. And he will return to dust. So why the pride? Why the esteem? Dust. It was only when Yah breathed in him he became a living soul. He was always dust. But he had forgotten who had given him that breath. So Solomon is looking at this. And he wants to give you the conclusion of the whole matter. He says, I have analyzed it. I have bisected. I have extracted. And I have gleaned. He says, a conclusion of the discourse that I have pursued, because I was in pursuit of truth. I was in search of meaning, of purpose. Why am I here? Philosophy didn't answer it. The period of the Enlightenment did not even come close. The Renaissance did not bother with it. They relied on self-absorbed men. And so we're living in an age now where we do not even know what it is like to be human. You look at someone over there and one man says, that's a woman, and another one says, he's a man. So if you don't know what it's like to be human, the question must be, what then is humanism? What is it? You say you're informed by science and you're motivated by the hearts. What is humanism if you don't know the difference between a man and a woman? Your life is indeed meaningless. But Solomon even now wants you to know it is meaningful because you were made for a different and a more profound reason and purpose in life. He said, let me give you the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear Yah and keep his commandment. That is your old duty. Fear him. Go back to Mount Sinai, and when he gave those commandments, the people feared. Today we don't blush, simply because many are not on speaking terms with Yah. Fear Yah. So here is a man who started out well, and he was told, Solomon, don't multiply horses, don't multiply wives. And he did. He did. And he's now writing his memoir. And this memoir is not only for a present generation in his time, but a subsequent one includes you and I. He says, having reviewed it, having studied it, I did an ethnography of it. I've done it. And the conclusion that I reached is that in all our possessions, our gifts, our talents, our skills, our resources, fear Yah and keep his commandments. That's your whole duty. And remember him, not when you're old, but in the days of your youth. Because the evil days are coming. The days when your hands are going to shake and you no longer the man you used to be. The eyes will not see as they once saw. You become feeble. But if you have no investment in the things of Yah, what then will you live on? That's what Solomon wants you to know. Which drives us to Revelation chapter 20. Revelation chapter 20, come with me there as we bring this to a close. Revelation chapter 20. The word here says, and I saw a messenger coming down from heaven, having the key of the pit, to the pit of the deep, and a great chain in his hand. And he seized the dragon. Who is the dragon? The serpent, Satan of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And threw him in. This is a man who have led us astray. And then threw him into the pit of the deep, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should lead the nations no more astray until the 1,000 years were ended. And after that, he has to be released for a little while. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them, and the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yeshua, and because of the word of Elohim, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not serve his mark, receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands, and they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. Now, this is what I was talking about, verse 5. And the rest of the dead did not come to life. This is the wicked dead, until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. This is the first resurrection. And then he tells you that these wicked ones now come to be judged and to be held accountable. You know, the general notion is that people think, I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it, because we have one life and they say, live it. And when you die, that's it. One man said it, that he did it his way. And he didn't have any regrets, but a few. But even Sinatra must now be asking questions. You lived on Broadway, but Yah says you ought to live in the narrow path, the narrow way, the way of the tree. Grow up and down. And they were judged, the word says. And I saw a great white throne, verse 11, and him who was sitting on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. No place was found for the wicked dead, those who died without Christ. No place. It's in the word. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up their dead who were in it. And death and Sheol gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged. Did you hear me? This is the white throne judgment. This is the wicked judgment. So when you hear people say that judgment day, no, the righteous are being judged now. Amen. You're not in the judgment of the wicked. You're not. And death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. This is a second death. This is what I spoke about earlier. They will die twice. And if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Think of the solemnity of this. That Yah may have allocated you 70, 80, 80, 90, 100 years. And in that time, you made no investment in the kingdom of Yah. You did not consider it necessary to put your soul in safekeeping. And then you pass. And relatives begin to scurry. And to church you, a dead man. Whose name may not have been in the Lamb's Book of Life. and is destined for the fire. And we gather, so we say, to pay our last respect. Solomon would say, vanity but vanity. Foolishness. Let me tell you the conclusion of not some of the matters, but the whole matters. Human behaviors are often directed by that antecedent stimuli. For me, it's the Ten Commandments. It's our enticement. It's the motive why we come here each week. Oh, yes. If your obedience is only to the denominational imperative, that obedience won't get you very far. Won't get you very far. Love for Yah is expressed in the obedience of his laws. If you love me, keep my commandments. Very simple. Very, very simple. So, let's put it this way. We cannot imagine ourselves into the kingdom. We must be obedient to get in. It's an absolute prerequisite. But sometimes when I listen to ministers, theologians, and even scholars, perhaps these are the grandees of our society. These putative leaders. They would give you the impression that they know. Solomon says, I was wiser than everybody, and I thought I knew. But the first thing I want you to know that I know that I didn't know. And now I know. So the conclusion is this: fear Yah and keep his commandments. That's your purpose in life. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.